Okay, so let's look at probably what is the biggest fight that's happening this weekend. The WBA and WBC World Light Middleweight titles. Of course, I'm talking about Saul Alvarez going up against Austin Trout. This is a really big fight. You know, I've kind of followed Trout for a few fights now, done a couple of his fights, covered a couple of his fights before. I really do rate the guy, and so let's get into this. We've got Saul Alvarez. He is the orthodox fighter in this one because Trout is a southpaw. Will that play a part? You know, how he deals with the southpaw stance of Trout. We'll have to wait and see. Saul Alvarez is unbeaten. He's 41 victories, no losses, 1 draw, around 71% KO ratio. I think Saul Alvarez does have power in his hands. You know, he's proved time and time again he can hurt you, and that's going to be a danger in this fight. Austin Trout, he's the bigger guy in this fight. He's a really good size of the weight, Austin Trout, actually, and he's going to be the bigger guy in the ring come the weekend. He's also unbeaten. He's 26 victories, no losses, no draws, around 53% KO ratio. So who should I talk about first? Let's actually talk about Saul Alvarez first, just briefly. You know, Saul Alvarez is a really big name in boxing now. He's been built up. He's been promoted very wisely. There was talk of him fighting Mayweather, etc. So he's been also discussed with, you know, real big fights with big top opponents, and he's been talked about in pound for pound terms, etc. Now, what I like about Alvarez, particularly in this fight, and this is sort of going in the ante when looking at a guy like Miguel Cotto, who Trout recently beat in his last fight. Whereas Cotto was throws a lot of hooks, he throws a lot of wide punches. He doesn't really throw a lot of straight punches, and he tends to try and get a bit close to attack as well, Cotto. Maybe it's because he was a small guy against Trout, but he does throw a lot of hooks. Don't make the mistake of thinking, of comparing Cotto with Alvarez. In my opinion, they are different fighters, mainly in that Alvarez throws a lot of good straight punches, and he also throws a lot of good body shots. We saw him get to Josecito Lopez with them, and he throws a lot of, like I say, good straight punches, and he throws a lot of power behind them. Another thing I really like with Saul Alvarez, and this is a key area of this fight for me, is what happens if Saul Alvarez does manage to push Trout back a bit, to pressurise Trout like Cotto did, and actually gets Trout on the ropes like Cotto did. What happens then? You know, what do we see? Do we see a replica of what happened with Miguel, or do we see Alvarez's clinical punching come into play, which I believe he has in his tank? Something I've really praised Alvarez in the past for is his ability to finish guys off and to really hurt guys when he gets them up close on the ropes. He's not a wasteful puncher. He's not a guy who gets too excited very much. He picks and chooses his punches. He's willing to wait, he's willing to be patient, and he's willing to really make those punches count and be effective. And that's what I really have liked about Alvarez in the past. Something he's going to have to do to his best of his ability in this fight, I believe, if he's going to catch Trout on the ropes, if he's going to have any success there. I like his punches, the variation of punches. I think the main thing I like about Alvarez is his arm work. Some people do say that his footwork is lacking and his speed is lacking. I actually think in his arms is where his main advantage is, because he does seem to throw very good punches from the arms. Not that he's an arm puncher, but I mean that he makes up a lot for his foot movement with a good range of solid punches up top coming from his upper body. He just seems to be able to land these good punches, and he will need to look for the body in this fight. He'll need to try, and particularly early on, because he'll need to try and slow Trout down, who I'm gonna briefly talk more about that with Trout in a bit. But he really needs to try and slow Trout down in this fight if he's going to get some success later on. I think that should be the plan for Alvarez, to work the body early and to therefore slow his opponent down, so in the later rounds he can start doing more of his better work up top, back to the body, and he can really, hopefully for him, get some more punches off cleaner and more accurately, and perhaps catch Trout a bit more, and unleash that power really. Let's move on to his opponent, Austin Trout. The first question I have over Trout is his level of opposition. Now, I know he beat Miguel Cotto in his last fight, but apart from that, really, I would say Saul Alvarez has fought better guys as an overall spectrum of, if you're looking at his list of opponents. Because before Cotto, he really didn't fight like a really top level of opposition, Austin Trout. He was, don't get me wrong, he was beating these guys very convincingly, but he wasn't facing, his main top class opponent has been Cotto, and Cotto is probably, you would say, the best opponent that either has probably faced. But as an overall consensus and as an overall constant, top higher level, I would say Alvarez has probably had the higher level of opponent up to this date. That's just my opinion. He's a bigger guy in this fight, Trout. He's got the slight size advantage. He's quick. He's got a boxing brain. He's got skills. Some guys, some fighters, some boxers, you can see that there's a certain aspect of the game is like their oxygen. It's like the air they breathe. And for me, Austin Trout's oxygen is his movement. He's got really good footwork and he moves really well. And that's something that people they struggle with. And don't take my word for it, just look at the fights he's had, look at the wins he's had. Look at the last good few fights that Trout has had. If you see that he's won by decision, look how wide the points are. Look how wide the gap is that he's won by. We're talking, your 118, 110, that type of fight. He's winning by a good, a load of rounds. He's really got this ability to make a fight get so lopsided to his on his side, and he really doesn't leave anything to chance. So he's not winning by split decisions. He's not having any close decisions. And like I said, maybe his opposition has not been that high, but even against Cotto, he won by a decent margin. So that has to say something for the guy, that he's able to, and I think it says something for his movement and his ability against the ropes and in defence to actually get out of the pocket, get out of that danger zone and actually reset and then start coming back with his own, jumping in, getting in there, jumping back out. He's able to land a couple of punches, he'll work the body and he'll get out and then he'll reset. Like I said, the rope work will be key here. What happens if Alvarez gets Trout to the ropes, particularly as the fight goes on later into the fight? If Trout starts backing up, because naturally he's a more mobile fighter, that's what tends to happen. Alvarez is more of a bludgeoning, walk through you type of fighter, whereas Trout's more of a skillful, slick movement type of fighter. That's what tends to happen. The more aggressive guy comes forward, and the more skillful, perhaps, the more mobile guy tends to move backwards. So it'd be interesting going later into this fight to see what Alvarez does, because I believe Alvarez has the ability to hurt Trout, and I think he can take a lot of points by backing Trout up, particularly since he is really a big name in boxing. He's a bigger name than Austin Trout at the moment, and unfortunately, let's look at this objectively. That tends to be the thing in boxing. The big name does get a bit of a boost on the scorecard sometimes. Be interesting to see. So what do I think will happen in this fight? Well, I'm picking Austin Trout to win this fight. I think he's going to win by a decision. I wouldn't say Austin Trout can't hurt Saul Alvarez, but I'm not expecting it. I'm not expecting Trout to hurt Alvarez. I think his game plan will be to frustrate Alvarez and to really just run away with it on the scorecards. And I think it may be closer than the other fights that Trout's been involved in. But maybe there will be like a 3-round deficit and Trout will win by about maybe 3 rounds. Maybe it'll be less, maybe it'll be 2 rounds. I'm not expecting, if Trout is going to be successful, I'm not expecting it to be that any closer. I'd be talking, around 3 rounds in Trout's favour. But I really think that Trout has the movement, he has the skills to pull this off. Is the fight in Texas as well? I think it is. I think that Trout is from Texas, I believe, so he may have the hometown crowd, although it is, that southern part, so it's down towards Mexico, and Alvarez is going to have his fans there as well. But Alvarez is a good boxer, and he's got power, and he's going to be dangerous in this fight. But I just think that with his movement and skills, I think Austin Trout does this. I actually think that he pulls this off, and I think he gets the decision over Saul Alvarez. So let me know what you guys think about this fight, and enjoy this fight this weekend. Thanks for watching.